Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Our discussion today is going to be on the CIA credential. The Foundation of AFWA is especially proud to be able to put these discussions out for our members and for our guests and friends wanting to learn more about the various different certifications and credentials involved in the accounting and financial industry, just to learn a little bit more about some of the career opportunities that are out there. So we do have a great panel that's going to answer several questions today, everything from what exactly is the CIA to what you can expect as far as the exam and preparation for the exam and exam day itself. So before we begin, I'm going to let Melissa Sager of the Foundation give a few words.
Thank you, Debbie. I just wanted to touch a little bit on about what the Foundation is and what we do and why we're sponsoring this. One of the primary missions of the Foundation of AFWA is to advance the education of women in the accounting and finance fields by providing numerous scholarships for all stages in a woman's career. You know, we have undergraduate and master's degree scholarships, and they're open to all accounting and finance students. As a benefit of membership, other scholarships are available only to AFWA members, including a PhD scholarship. But we also provide review course scholarships for those pursuing their CPA, EA, CMA, CFP, and of course CIA, like we're discussing today, and some other certifications, and even scholarships for the certification exam fees. The Foundation really encourages women to apply for these and all other scholarships to overcome the financial barriers that we sometimes have in our career. Our members and other generous contributors feel it is important to help those who come after them, just as they may have been helped on their path to a successful career. And if you go to our website, the scholarship applications can be found there. That's www.afwa.org. And I'll turn it back over to you, Debbie.
All right, thanks so much, Melissa. And now I would like to ask our panelists today to introduce ourselves. We have Annette, Christensen, Karletta, oh gosh, I can't see your last name. Carletta Jones, I'm sorry about that. I had something in front of the screen, and Scott Mayer. So I'll let each of you introduce yourselves. Annette, if you'd like to begin.
Yes, hi. I'm Annette Christensen. I live in the Los Angeles, California area. I am self-employed after 10 years of working for one of the large accounting firms as well as a consulting firm. And I had to look back. When I started at the accounting firms, I started working on my credentials. So I looked them all up. So we go back to 2001. I got my Certified Information Systems Auditor's credential, followed by my CPA's credential for California in February of 2003. Got my Certified Internal Auditor's credential in May of 2003. And then a new credential came out from the Institute of Internal Auditors for a Certified Risk Management Assurance credential, which I obtained in May of 2013.
Okay.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Karletta Jones, and I graduated from Northern Arizona University in 2001 with a bachelor's degree in accounting. And Northern Arizona University is situated in the northern part of Arizona. And believe it or not, we get snow up here. In fact, about 3 weeks ago, we got pounded with snow.
Oh, wow.
So that was a great workout, shoveling our driveway. After graduation, I worked at Ernst & Young in the Phoenix area, and I worked in their audit department for a couple of years. I moved back to Flagstaff because my husband was accepted into NAU's physical therapy program. And then I worked at a local accounting firm in Flagstaff for almost 9 years before moving over to NAU's internal audit department. The main decision for moving over to the university was because my kids, I have 3 boys, and my oldest is going to be graduating by this time next year. It's amazing. Time just flies. So that was one of the main reasons, was because of the benefit of getting reduced tuition. And then I obtained my CPA license in 2015 and my CIA certification in 2016, quite a few years after graduation and working.
That's great. And Scott?
Hi, everybody. I'm Scott Mayer. I'm actually, I work for Wiley Efficient Learning, so I don't have a CIA of my own, but what I do work on is I work on the test prep for individuals who want to sit for this exam or for any of the others that you've heard mentioned. We actually work on test prep for a range of accounting, credentials and exams that you've probably encountered or might encounter in the future. And what I do is I work with customers to ensure that, we're helping them feel as comfortable as they can with passing. We're helping them, hopefully expand their career opportunities and, get certified in the CIA or get certified as a CPA or whatever the case is, so that we can be your resource for everything from, accounting to, any of the other range of things that you could be working on as a professional. It could even be, something like project management or getting your GMAT. I work on all of that stuff. So I'm very knowledgeable when it comes to the process that it takes to sit for these exams, and I'm very excited to talk about CIA.
Okay. Great, thank you. And Scott, I'll actually go ahead and stick with you if you want to start out on just telling us a little bit about what exactly the CIA is.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, I personally have not ever sat for this exam myself. So there is probably, I'm going off of the information that I've gleaned kind of through my experience. But of course, anybody else, can feel free to jump in here if you think that I'm glossing over something that's important or, if you feel like I'm missing anything. The CIA exam is a 3-part exam. And in order to sit for it, you'd have to have an associate's degree or a higher education. Internationally, I believe that there's some exceptions to that, but for the most part, I think the rule of thumb is an associate's degree. You need to have a character reference sheet from a CIA, a CGAP, a CCSA, a CFSA, a CRMA, or a candidate supervisor. So you need to be given this reference sheet to be eligible to sit for the exam. You have to have work experience in an applicable field. The amount of experience is going to be adjusted based on the level of your education. And then in order to actually sit for the exam, it's given at a testing center. The test is completely digital. It's done in an online program, and you need to actually sit for the exam. In order to schedule that, you need to apply for IIA certification. You need to have been notified of your eligibility to sit, so that means that you've met all of the requirements that I mentioned above. And you need to have paid the examination authorization fee. Sorry. So with all of that said, I know that that's a lot. All of that can also be found on the IIA's website. I would assume that you're going to be spending between 130 and 180 hours studying for the exam. It's not quite, the body of studying that you'd have to do for some of the other ones, but 180 hours is still quite a lot of studying. That takes into account that you might have more or less work experience, or you might have experience on certain topics. And it's important to remember that there's 3 parts. So you can study for one part of the exam, take that part, pass that exam, and then begin studying for the next part. So it's not necessarily like you have to sit for all 3 at the same time, but you can definitely break it up, and that makes your studying a little bit easier. A lot of people are very successful. They'll take the CIA exam after passing the CPA exam, but it's not a prerequisite. It is something that we see very commonly with the products that I mentioned that I work on, but it really depends, of course, on your career goals and what you want to accomplish, your career journey. As far as studying for the exam, this is the part that I, specifically, there's a wide range of study guides, simulated exams, video lessons, test banks, anything to help you master the topics and understand what it takes to sit for the exam. And it's important to take advantage of these, whether, it's Wiley, which is what I work on, or whether it's a competitor. It's very common that people will use these learning tools in order to make sure that they're as prepared as possible. And you want to get as much practice in the questions. You want to get practice in a time setting, which can obviously be, very stressful for a lot of people. So having all these alternatives to, get yourself prepared and get in the mindset of actually sitting for the exam is very valuable. These can help you get comfortable, and the more practice that you can get, the more ready you're going to be on test day. So I know, like I said, that's a lot, but that is what I prepared as far as like a little overview of what the CIA exam actually is. I don't know if anybody has anything to add.
Great. Well, yeah, Carletta and Annette, and I guess Carletta, I'll start with you. I don't know if you could just talk a little bit about the CIA itself, and sort of what prompted you to seek the certification and what it's meant to your career.
Yeah. So although I had my CPA designation, because I was now working as an internal auditor, that kind of followed its own set of standards. I just wanted to make sure I was prepared to answer questions from clients, from peers, from our governing board, if there was any questions regarding the internal audit profession. Previously, I stated I worked for Ernst & Young and I worked in their audit department, but that was external auditing, looking at financial statements, issuing the financial statements, and that sort of thing. So this was a different arena for me, internal audit, as far as looking at the governance, the controls, the risks related to it. You're looking at everything from start to finish. And so that was really intriguing to me. And I really was able to use that to my advantage because I like to problem solve. And I think the internal audit profession and getting this designation helps you to see the entire picture and not just one aspect of it related to maybe the financial statements. And I also believe it brings validity to the work that we do at the university. We're one of the 3 institutions. There's Northern Arizona University, Arizona State University, and University of Arizona that are all the 3 sister universities in the state of Arizona. And I think it adds value to the reports because it shows the report readers that we're following a set of standards. It shows our governing board and even the general public, because we are partially funded from taxpayer money, that we're not only following standards that promotes an objective attitude, but it shows that we're dedicated to the profession of internal audit.
That's great. What about you, Annette?
Well, Carlotta has brought up a lot of great things that are very true about the profession and about the certification. I'm going to take the time to maybe take a step back and include some of the other information that Karletta already provided. So I graduated from Cal State University, Northridge, and at the time, the degree that was offered was in business administration, and I took concentrations in both accounting and information systems, in part because I said, well, any accounting system is a system. It's not, no one's doing manual double entry bookkeeping anymore. It's all done on the system. I need to know more about that. So when I graduated, I then had the opportunity to go to work for Arthur Andersen in their risk consulting practice, which really is the area of internal audit within the organization. And because I had an IT education as well, one of the first things I went for was the Certified Information Systems Auditor's credential. And one of the things I liked about it was that it's a global certification. I did get my CPA. I did get my Form E signed off with my hours that would allow me to sign off on financial statements if I had been interested in pursuing my career that direction. As Carlotta said, focusing specifically on the financial statement, preparation and reporting for a client organization. And so I did obtain that, but right on the heels of that, I said, well, I'm working in the internal audit space. Hey, this is also an international credential versus just my CPA, which is only good in the specific state or states where I can practice or there's reciprocity. And I said, so, I should look into this. And even though I already had the information systems credential, one of the big things that I learned just studying for the Certified Internal Auditor's exam was a lot more about the management of an internal audit department, the need for, there to be a charter for the chief audit executive and the people who report to him as part of the organization. And as Carletta alluded to, I think it was really just the enjoyment of being able to look at the company from a whole and be able to look at how the company does things. And when I was doing consulting, you have a chance to see that across various companies and various industries. So you get a perspective of how companies do things differently, and that also makes you valuable as a resource to let companies know how they compare with others, potentially in the same industry. So I think that's really the joy that I get from internal audit. So as I was really gravitating to, to that work ethic and that work mode, this is what I enjoy doing, I said, well, then I certainly need to have, a certification that shows, as Carlotta said, that I'm serious about what I'm doing. As I wanted to answer, as far as the benefit to my career, anytime you have a certification, like Carlotta said, it gives you more credibility with the person that you're auditing. One of the things that I do like as well about the Institute of Internal Auditors, who provides this certification, along with a lot of others besides just this one, is the fact that they have taken a lot from other organizations, whether it's AICPA, other places. We do have all the same type of standards that Karletta said, that we have to work with independence. We have to have standards on how we have professional conduct with regards to how we execute our audits, just like you would for an external audit. So that's another thing about the involvement that I've had with my certification and the actual Institute of Internal Auditors as well, with the guidance that they give us, it's really helpful as well to make sure that you're doing your job to the best of your ability.
That is great. Thank you so much. I think it's always great to talk to somebody and hear from somebody who really has joy in their career. And so it's just nice to hear you throw out the words, the joy and the enjoyment that you have for your job, and that the CIA has been able to add to your career. I think that's especially great. And I like that you went on a little bit more about the Institute of Internal Auditors. I know Scott mentioned that briefly earlier in his requirements for the exam, so I was going to ask you all a little bit more, just to talk a little bit more about what that is. I'm kind of hearing that if you are interested in getting your CIA, that's probably the first place that you would want to go and kind of look into for that process. I don't know if Annette, you want to respond to that, or Scott, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Annette.
Well, I was just going to say that one of the other things that's really great about it is that, so like with a lot of other organizations, we actually have local chapters. So in the Southern California area, we actually happen to have 7 chapters. Others, I believe, like in Houston, for example, they have like one huge chapter with like 3,000 members in the one chapter. Similar for Chicago. And each chapter, and there's a reporting structure. So there's a chapter that has a district representative. District representative reports to a district advisor. Both the district advisor and representative are, part of a panel that represents the chapters themselves to the national organization. And then there's the hierarchy of the national organization, with various committees for education, for training, for programs, for getting CPE. And that is another thing too. It's taken me a little while to kind of understand more than just the basics of, like the guidance that the organization provides to you. But it's, as I've gotten into it more and more, it's very interesting to see how we come together as a group. And I don't know of a lot of other organizations besides like AFWA, for example, where people from, all over the United States or all over the world get a chance to come together and talk about their profession and changes in their profession, and which adds, of course, to your learning. Specifically, the Institute, we get newsletters. That's probably the biggest thing, newsletters that, keep you up to date on things that are happening. Our CEO and president has a blog that he, puts out all the time. I've had a chance to meet lots of people who've written very interesting books about internal audit, and been able to get guidance from them as well. So it's a really I don't know, I feel like it's a really nice family organization, and, you know, similar to AFWA, really enjoyed my participation as part of the organization.
Okay, great. Did anyone else have anything to add about the IIA? If not, I'll go ahead and move on to an attendee question that we had received just through registration for today's event. Somebody mentioned that she already has her CPA, and so is it worth it for her to get her CIA? Annette, I'll stick with you and ask you first.
Sure. And at the risk of repeating myself a little bit, I think the bottom line is, you know, if you're really happy doing financial, you know, audit, and, you know, that just really gets you up in the morning and you really enjoy it, you know, definitely, if that's the only thing you're interested in, you know, stay there and you'll be happy. I think that's for getting the Certified Internal Auditor's credential. I think unless you're really going to do something more, you know, where you're part of the company or closer to the company and you're part of an internal audit department, which I know even some of the Big Four have departments that do internal audit consulting as well. So my friends that are in the Big Four are also encouraged, of course, by their firms to get the Certified Internal Auditor's credential if that's the, you know, the space that they work in for the organization. I think it's worth it for a lot of different reasons, but then again, if you're not interested in spending time in that space, then why spend the money, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think sort of from what I think I heard both from you and Annette and Carlotta, that you had, and just kind of in thinking of, is it worth it to get that other credential? It sounds like you both had your job first and then you earned the CIA. Is that the case, or do you think organizations are specifically looking for people with CIAs, or does that tend to fall in the, you kind of get the job and then you're encouraged to get it? Carlotta, I don't know if you have a comment to that.
You know, I think it's similar with any other designations. I know when I started with Ernst & Young, I graduated and then started immediately, basically, and didn't have my CPA, but was preparing to take the exam. So they do encourage you to, you know, have that designation in public accounting if you're going to be helping with auditing financial statements and helping with issuing the audit reports. And there again, just like Annette had said, they had an internal audit practice for Ernst & Young. Although I didn't know much about it, I knew kind of when I graduated from Northern Arizona University that the track really was I was going to stay in external auditing and just move forward from there. So kind of I had that in mind, and I did really well with that. I mean, I really enjoy looking at financial statements, understanding how numbers arrive on there, how the process works. But I think even with the CIA, it goes a step further because you understand the intricacies on how things get reported, what the processes are, what the risks are, whether it's an internal risk, an external risk, what the governance is. And I know that the governance piece of it can be a little bit more subjective at times because you kind of get into the bureaucracy there. But there again, I think the standards kind of get us back on track as far as having that objective attitude and sticking to, you know, what are the facts there and what can add value to the different areas that you're looking at as far as internal audit goes. But to Annette's point, I believe, yeah, it takes time and effort and energy and studying for any sort of test. And I know when I came over to the university and I already had my CPA license, I thought, okay, I'm done, I'm good, I don't really need to study for anything else again. And lo and behold, there was, with each new path, new career, you're given goals. Okay, well, what is your goal now that you're in this arena? And honestly, I didn't know a whole lot about the internal audit profession. So I think taking the exam, and here again, I am serving as an internal auditor. My title specifically a senior internal auditor for the university. So I took advantage of taking the test and getting the certification. But to Annette's point, yes, it did help because I was on that career path already. But I think it just definitely helped as far as seeing more of how things operate to get to what the economic impact is that's going to eventually be reported on our financial statement.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thank you.
Let me make.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, let me make one little segue, because part of what you asked too was about, whether I went in with the idea of becoming a certified internal auditor, or if the credential is more of an afterthought. And one of the things that has changed in the past 15 years since I got my license is that the Institute of Internal Auditors has an educational foundation that specifically works with universities to set up a program specifically for, internal audit education. Certainly when I graduated in 1998, you kind of left with that mindset of, well, you have to decide if you're going to go into tax or audit. And those were your only two choices when you left the university. So it wasn't until after I got involved with the firm and saw that there was this, other practices Carletta mentioned related to internal audit and really working with management to help them, improve their organization's controls. That was when I, was then introduced to the idea of getting this certified internal auditor's credential. But the organization has been working to push that down into the universities so that students have that choice of, well, do I want to go into audit, tax, or internal audit? So they can make a different choice and select that earlier on in their career.
And one other thing that I'd like to also add is I think that, and maybe it's just in our area in Flagstaff. I mean, we're a small town. Phoenix is the larger city in Arizona, but in Flagstaff, I think people are seeing more of the need for internal audit. I was really surprised that the university had internal auditors. I think that was outsourced previously, but I think now they've had the internal audit department for several years now, and now the county, actually Coconino County, just recently opened and hired a position with that. And one of the ladies that just recently joined AFWA Flagstaff chapter, she got that position. And so we've been kind of bouncing ideas off of each other because she's basically starting from scratch there. So I think counties and just areas are seeing more of the opportunity. And like I said, maybe it's just me seeing it from a small town atmosphere. Maybe it's more prevalent in other areas, but I think definitely there is value in seeing and having an internal audit department.
That's a great comment, and I'm sure if you're seeing that in Flagstaff, that other markets are seeing that as well. So I think that's a great comment and great piece to share. I want to go ahead and move just back to the exam for a little bit. I know that the two of you both kind of mentioned the studying of it and kind of the desire to advance your career in that way and studying. Scott, I know you already talked a lot about the prerequisites and some of the things that you need to know in advance. One thing that we hadn't touched on a lot that I know we always get a lot of questions about is the study time itself and how long realistically somebody should plan to study for this exam and kind of what they should expect as far as a time commitment. So Scott, I don't know if you want to start us off on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that I mentioned a little bit earlier that the number that we typically say is anywhere between 130 hours and 180 hours. And that's just talking about, strictly studying. Obviously, as Annette and Carlotta could tell you, there's a significant amount of work experience that's required also, so that's not even taking into consideration. That could be, multiple years of getting that work experience as well. And then within that, again, kind of repeating myself from before, it's just practice as much as you can on exam simulations, on drilling yourself for the core concepts and the questions to make sure that you're as comfortable and knowledgeable about it as you can be. Let me see what else I might have here. I mean, as far as the amount of time to prepare is also going to just vary on your specific studying style. Some people are really good with long sessions of I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to drill on these multiple choice questions, and sometimes people need to break it up a little bit, or even if you're working and you're a professional, you don't necessarily have, 3 hours a day that you can spend working on this stuff. So, when it comes to your actual learning style, it's up to you to really, know yourself in that regard and know, which is going to be the most, which is going to be the most effective way for me to study, because otherwise, you know, it's going to be really tricky for you. So that's kind of where it comes down to your unique kind of way that you can retain information, and that might dictate how much time you're actually spending as well.
Mm-hmm. What about as far as, and this was an attendee question, I think they're always kind of looking to compare the different experiences, but just as far as the CIA versus the CPA, the exam itself, the preparation time needed, the requirements, are there kind of any standout comparisons or contrasts between the CIA and the CPA?
Yeah, there definitely are. You know, I think the most obvious difference is that while the CIA is only 3 parts, the CPA exam is actually 4. So it is a larger exam. Each one of those is a 4-hour exam for each part. So it's already, you know, a longer time commitment than what you're doing for CIA. It's going to cover a lot more. You know, internal auditing, I think, is just one specific part of what the CPA will actually cover, and it's going to go into all like the kind of public accounting, you know, topics and subject areas. And I think, you know, a big difference as far as what the exam experience is that there's also written communication questions. There's, you know, tests like simulations that are in that exam, whereas before I said the CIA exam focuses on, you know, a pretty straightforward multiple choice examination. Here there's going to be a lot more in addition to the multiple choice. So you know, that's going to also then require you to practice those things. It's not quite as simple as just, you know, opening a test bank and trying to, you know, answer the 4, you know, the A, B, C, D. You then have to go into kind of these other skill areas while you're testing. So those are some very obvious differences. But you know, like I said, I think the CIA exam to me is a great complement to what if you were already planning on sitting for the CPA. A lot of that information that you're getting from the CPA could be very transferable to the CIA, and it would just get a little bit more granular as far as what you're researching and what you're learning for the internal auditing exam itself.
Great, thank you. Carlotta, would you have anything to add just as far as your own experiences, as far as preparation for the exam, the requirements, just kind of what to expect with it?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, I am not a great test taker, and I know that about myself. So I definitely needed to go for the gusto, quote unquote. And I did that also with the CPA exam. So I followed a similar approach when I was preparing for the CPA exam. I basically bought the flashcards, I bought the videos, I bought the books for my CPA exam preparation, and I studied. I knew it was going to be a sacrifice for several months. Thankfully, my husband was able to pick up any household duties and, you know, get the kids and take care of them and all of that. So that was very helpful. So I was able to just be dedicated to just studying. And similar to that, for my exam materials for the CIA, I did similar. I created my own flashcards. I bought the online and the book available, and I did multiple choice questions and read through the books. And my approach was, okay, well, I'm going to figure out which one is the thickest book and study a lot more for that one. And Scott had mentioned the CIA exams comprised of 3 parts. And so the internal audit basics in the very beginning, and I think it's called something like essentials now. I'm being in the profession as far as external audit profession for 9 years at that point, a lot of those concepts were pretty easy to grasp, which included independence, due care, controls, sampling, work papers. So it was stuff that I had, you know, put into practice. I mean, you read the books, but you're putting it into practice, so it becomes habit, I guess. And so those were easier concepts to grasp. And then the internal audit practice, I knew that was going to be a little bit more challenging because I felt like that was just specific to, okay, well, I need to know how the internal audit arena works. And I actually had to take part 2 twice. And I think part of it was just I underestimated part 2, thinking, okay, well, I kind of walked through part 1. And so part 2, I studied a lot more. And with part 3, which was the thickest part, that dealt with a lot of different concepts, from IT systems, finance and accounting concepts, governance, industry, environments. I really made sure I studied a lot more on part 3 just to make sure I didn't have that disappointing feeling leaving the testing center as I did in part 2. So I definitely studied a lot more in that area. So I probably would say I dedicated about 20 hours maybe on part 1, only because I had that experience, like I had mentioned, and then I increased it a little bit more for part 2. And then for part 3, I was probably close to 40 hours, just to make sure I, definitely was able to pass that the first try.
Thank you so much for sharing that experience. Annette, would you have anything to add?
Yes, I do want to add something, but first I have a question for Carletta. Since I took my exam in 1998, it was 4 parts at that time, or I'm sorry, it wasn't 1998, it was more in 2003, but at that time there were 4 parts, and I was excused from taking one of those parts because I had my CPA's license. So with the exam that you took, which was a couple years ago, is there still some kind of parts you don't have to take because you have a CPA?
No, and I'm wondering now if that 4th part was dropped off. I'm curious because I was only able to take 3 parts, and I had to take all 3 parts.
Scott, do you know anything about that?
Okay.
Sorry, I was on mute. I do not. That actually predates kind of, where, as far as my knowledge of the exam, so I can't comment on that, unfortunately.
Okay. Yeah, no worries. Just from my own experience, a few things from my own experience, I definitely found the CPA exam, more strenuous and harder from the perspective of there was a lot more technical things that you needed to have a certain, depth of knowledge on. For the CIA exam, I actually found it a lot easier to do than other exams I had taken. But as Carletta said, I still, had review books. I can't remember if I did a review course specifically, like a live course or not. But I did spend a lot of time with CD-ROM questions so that I could continue to go through them and kind of get used to how questions are asked and, kind of a strategy for determining, what would be the right answer if it didn't come to me on the top of my head. They did actually revise the exam effective January of this year. And so it is still of 3 parts. And I noticed that part 3 has business knowledge, which, is almost 45% information security and information technology. But apparently that was the same for what Carletta had in 2016, but that was new to me. We didn't have anything like that when I took the exam. Part 2 is the practice of internal auditing. So it's kind of like how you manage the activity, plan the engagement, perform the engagement, and communicate the engagement results. So that really is the process for internal audit. And then the first section, Essentials of Internal Auditing, focuses on, the standards. So, governance, risk management and control, proficiency in due professional care, independence and objectivity, the foundations of internal auditing. So in that sense, to me at least, it didn't seem that it was quite as, technical as the CPA exam. And so for that reason, it was a little bit easier. At least that's how I quantify it.
Thank you so much. I think that we have covered a lot today, everything just from each of your own personal experiences as far as your career and kind of what the CIA has allowed you to do, your passion for it and the industry and the exam itself. So I think there's been a lot of great practical information in this. Today, I want to kind of begin our wrap up with each of you giving each of you one last thing, whether it's a great study tip that you have, or if you have specific advice for anybody that's listening to this that might be considering, going for the CEA, what advice you might have to help her make that decision to go for it. So any kind of last comment that each of you might want to add, and Annette, I'll begin with you.
So I guess kind of my final thought would be that, if you have an interest, definitely go for it. Even if you're not interested in taking on internal audit as a career path, I I still am of the mind that, you know, more knowledge is better. So quite honestly, I've advised people that even if they don't actually take the exam, and this goes for other areas too, still buy the study materials. Take a look at it, see what it's about. Still, you can still learn something about, you know, internal audit, even if you may decide at some point not to go for the full certification.
That's great. What about you, Carletta?
I was just going to add, as far as the experience related to the exam day, I know that, and Scott, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think most of the testing facilities are through Pearson VUE. And so Pearson VUE handles not only the CIA exam, but other exams as well. So when you go to the facility, you'll have others that are there, not only taking the CIA exam, but I know when I went one day, there was I'm guessing it was a doctor. She was in her scrubs and she was coming to take her exam. And so you'll have individuals there from other industries and taking other types of exams. And I know on the CIA exam, it's multiple choice, so it's pretty much clicking of a mouse. But I know on other test takers will be typing. So you'll have that to hear as well. And that's really similar to the CPA exam as well. I know that when I took the test for the CPA exam, there was an individual that was just typing nonstop. And I'm like, oh my gosh, hopefully he'll be done with his exam soon. So it was just kind of being prepared that, you know, there's going to be distractions around you. And even when you're taking the test itself, it's all on the computer. And so you'll have a little timer on your screen there that'll help as far as when you're taking the exam and you're clicking through, and you're able to flag the questions where you may not be completely sure if you selected the correct choice. So you'll be able to go back and review the questions for those that you flagged. And I would just recommend going, you know, taking the whole time for the exam. Sometimes I think for the last exam, I averaged however it was per minute to take the exam. And then I went back and just made sure that I covered the flagged ones. And I told myself, I'm not going to go back to the ones I did not flag because I'm going to second guess myself. And the nice thing about the CIA exam is that the results are immediate. So when you're done with your test, you log off and you walk out to the area that you checked in at, and they'll present the results to you immediately. And you'll have this jump for joy or the or this feeling of disappointment, which is my case in one of the parts. But yeah, that's kind of the nice part, is that you're able to get your results immediately. I know for the CPA exam, it took several weeks before you found out if you passed or not, even though when I left each time, I was thinking I didn't pass. And then lo and behold, I got my results back and I passed. So that's the nice part, is that you know immediately if you've passed or not.
That's good. And so for those who have stayed with us through the end, they just got some great little tidbits and insight from you, Carletta. So thank you for sharing that. I think there's some things in there, such as the distractions and so forth, that I might not have thought of with taking the exam. So I think that's all good to know. Scott, what about you? Any kind of closing comments?
Yeah, really quick, I will mention, Carlotta's right. Pearson VUE actually has a really good video on their website that walks you through the testing experience and you know what you can bring and how the exam is going to go. So I always recommend to people to check that out. It is definitely a very overwhelming experience. You will have access to, you know, a whiteboard and they'll give you an online calculator that you can use, but you're not able to bring any of your own items or anything either. So I definitely would say, you know, check out that video if you're able to, and that would give you like a really good idea of what to expect for exam day. But as far as what I would say to anybody who's considering the exam, and of course, right, like, because I work at Wiley and we work on the test prep, so obviously I'm going to mention, you know, that there's so many good test prep options there. Even if you're not sure if you want to sit for the exam, you know, there's free trials for everything now. All you have to do is really, you know, check it out, and you know, whether it's Wiley or something else, that'll give you a good sense of what the content is like, and that'll give you a good sense of kind of what the experience is. But almost everybody, you know, that sits for these exams is using some kind of guide, whether it's like a written textbook or whether it's an online course that's really comprehensive. And definitely lean on those tools and use those to help you make your decision, because you know, that's why they're there. So I would say, you know, go check that out. It's really easy, whether you're using Amazon or you're using Google or whatever. It's really easy to find a lot of options, and then I guarantee you that, you know, you're going to find something that's going to fit with what makes the most sense for you while you're studying. So I always tell that to people, take the free trials, do the research. It's not hard. You can take an afternoon and just kind of go through, and you're going to have a good idea by the end of it of what makes the most sense for you. And I think that's what you should really think about doing. And it's all about the practice. Once you've decided that you're actually going to sit for the exam, take advantage of those tools and just keep practicing until you feel comfortable with it.
Thank you so much. Annette, Carletta, Scott, thank you all so much. I think we covered, again, a lot today, certainly some great information for anybody who's considering the CIA. Special thank you to the Foundation for organizing today's panel discussion. I do have some contact information for the Foundation on the screen now. If you have any questions, additional questions for today's panelists or about the exam itself or the resources that the Foundation of AFWA has in helping you prepare and take that exam, you can email us at foundation@afwa.org or certainly visit afwa.org to find out any information that you may have. So thank you again to our panelists again today. Thank you, Melissa, from the Foundation. There was some great information. And I think that wraps us up today. So unless anyone has any closing comments, I think we're set. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
You.